So our next part of the plant unit, we're going to look at how plants are grouped and what distinguishing characteristics different plants have, because not all plants are created equal. We see here, look at a cladogram of plants. Remember cladograms back from a couple units ago. Green algae down here, the protist, that is the ancestor of all plants. And we move up to our mosses, which are non-vascular, our ferns, our gymnosperms and angiosperms. We're going to look at each of those different categories today and look at how they're similar, how they're different, where they fit in the plant kingdom. So plants are put into 4 groups: reproduction and vascular tissue. The first group, the seedless non-vascular plants, meaning they do not have seeds. They don't have that vascular system that we talked about with the xylem and phloem. These are your mosses, liverworts. They have to have water. You know, you find a lot of moss growing on different things around lakes, streams, rivers, because they have to have that water for their reproductive process to work. Group 2 are our seedless vascular. Still don't have seeds, but now we do have that xylem and phloem. And you notice these plants, you look at the fern here, or the moss in this first picture. The fern grows a little bit taller than the moss. It can grow taller. It has that vascular system. All right, fern's a good example of a seedless vascular plant. Our third group, these are our gymnosperms. All right, cone-bearing seed plants. All right, gymnosperm have what we call naked seeds. They are not inside of something, not inside of a fruit. They are on the outside. All right, this pine cone here has its seeds on the different blades. The seed is on the outside of the blade. It's not down inside protected. It's on the outside. All right, still have to have pollen to go with that seed, the sperm and egg. All right. Our fourth group are our flowering seed plants. These are our angiosperms. They have pollen too, just as the cone bearing, but now they have a seed that's inside of a fruit. All right. Every piece of fruit, apple, orange, pear, plum, that is the ovary, the seed egg holder of the plant. The pollen is the sperm cell of the plant. This fruit contains the egg, the seed. All right. So a little more about gymnosperms. Said they have seeds. They're not inside of a fruit. We have our pine tree here, our pine cone. You can see the little red dots on the outside of the pine cone. Those are the actual seeds, the egg cells of the tree, all right, of this plant. Most of these are cone-bearing and evergreen, meaning they're green all year long. The cone is the reproductive structure for most gymnosperms. Pollen is produced on male cones, which you see here on the right. These little orange, they'll turn yellow. That is the cone of the male reproductive part. That is the pollen. Eggs are produced in the female cones. All right, you see those on the left here. And the seeds develop on the scales. Those little red dots, those are the seeds. So we have seed, we have pollen. You put the two together, you get a new tree. Okay, this is happening right now. You see this going on right now, where these trees, if you look at these pine trees outside, you see yellow all over. That's the sperm cell on the male cones that are ready to be dispersed. Wind is dispersing them, rain is dispersing them, so that they can fertilize the seeds or the eggs in these female cones and make new trees. Angiosperms, these are the ones that have the seeds inside the fruit. You see the apple there, got the seeds inside. All right, this is the ovary of the plant. All right. A flower is the reproductive structure. It's the part that contains that pollen. It will produce that fruit. All right. When it produces it and it matures, we have a piece of fruit. That is the mature ovary of the flower, like you see that apple there. All right. Flowers allow for efficient pollination, meaning you have the egg, you got the sperm, you got everything right there. You can have that pollination happen quickly, efficiently, and we move from plant to plant using those animals or different ways it can be dispersed. Animals, as you see this hummingbird here, he's feeding on the nectar in that plant. He's going to take that pollen with him, and he's going to go give it to another plant so that we have that, get that variety within the species, movement of alleles. Fruits also allow for efficient seed dispersal. The fruit is the flower's ovary. So when that fruit ripens, it drops, it falls off the tree, off the plant. Organisms such as this little mouse over here on the right can eat that. He takes those seeds and he disperses them later on. All right. The fruit protects the seed. The seed has a coating that protects itself. And we get different ways it can be dispersed. All right. Dropping, rolling, water, animals, other organisms, different ways for those seeds to be dispersed. Okay, so let's look at how plants are built. All right, as with any other living organism, we all start with the basic. We start with the smallest unit of life. That's the cell. There, we progress from cells to tissues, tissues to organs, organs to organ systems, and so on. First, we look at the cells. We have three types of cells within the plant. The first one is the parenchyma cells. These are the most common in the plant. There are a lot of these are used for storage. Plants have to have a lot of things, and plants can't just get up and go get them. All right, they can't get up and walk, pop up out of the ground, walk on their roots over to the stream, get a drink. They have to have some place to put that water because they never know when they're going to get it again. So these parenchyma cells, they're used to store water and starch, which is a food source, and oils. All right. They also are the healing portion of the plant. Just like with us, when we get a cut, our cells build on top of each other to fill in that cut. Well, the same thing happens with the plant. Plant gets injured, gets cut, wounded, bit by an animal, something, organism. They have to fill in the gaps, so to speak. So that's what these cells do. They come in and they fill in the gaps and heal the plant. They are not the typical firm, hard plant cells. You think about that thick, stiff cell wall. These are very flexible. They have very thin cell wall that allow them to bend and move and fill in whenever they're needed to fix a wound. The second type of cell is called the parenchyma. All right, these cells provide support. So these are your really thick, heavy cell-walled cells. You see in the picture there, the black portion of that picture, they have dyed the cell wall so you can see it better. It's a lot thicker than up in that first picture. All right, these are the ones that give the plant some structure, some support. They make it strong so that it can stand up high. All right. You eat celery and you bite into a stalk of celery and you get these little strings that stick out? Those strings are made of parenchyma cells. They're the tough part of the plant, the tough part of that stalk. The last one is sclerenchyma. These are the strongest cells in the plant. They have not only one cell wall made of cellulose, they also have a second cell wall made of lignin. And lignin is a chemical that becomes very hard, very dense, allows that plant to have that straight shape, allows it to grow tall and not just break and fall over. All right. When they reach a certain age, they mature, they die off, and they're replaced by new new pieces of lignin around the cell. All right. So you think about bark on a tree. All right. Bark on a tree is a very thick, hard layer. You know, that's what makes what it's made of. It's made of this lignin chemical. All right. We use this portion of plants to make things like rope, to make things like linens, which are bed sheets and stuff like that, because it's strong. It's a very strong component. All right, doesn't break real easy. You know, you don't want a piece of rope that's tying something down to break real easy. It does. You got all your stuff's going everywhere. All right, but those are our three types of cells in the plant. Plants, you go from cells to tissues. All right, so we had three types of cells. We got three types of tissues. The first one is dermal tissue. Dermal, we have a dermal layer. It's our outer layer of skin. Well, it's the same concept in the plant. Covers the outside of the plant. You see it here in the picture, the epidermis. That's that very outer layer. Notice it is a little bit thicker, a little bit stronger, because it's protection for the plant. All right. This layer of tissue is what makes that cuticle we talked about. It gives off that chemical, secretes that chemical, so that the leaves can be covered and protected. And it forms the outer bark of trees. All right, that's that thick layer that protects the inner layer of the tree. Just like your skin, it's our layer that protects our inner organs, our inner muscles, everything inside of us. All right. The next layer moving in is the ground tissue. All right. Ground tissue provides support. This will be almost like you say our muscles. You know, we go from skin to muscle, and eventually we get down to bone. All right. So the ground tissue here is for support. It stores materials. All right. And it's usually made of parenchyma cells. All right. That last central hub there, right in the middle, are our vascular tissue. All right. This is our xylem, our phloem that we've talked about. All right. We want those tubes, all that stuff to be protected. You've got two layers outside to protect it, because that is our lifeline of the plant. It's what moves water up. The xylem moves water up from the roots. Phloem moves sugars and other things made from photosynthesis down into the plant from the leaves. You think about your arteries, your veins. Are they going to be that? They're the main source of movement of blood. Are they going to be right on? Excuse me. Right on the surface? Excuse me again. Where any little injury you get cuts that major artery and you bleed out and die? No, they're a little bit deeper. All right, so we've got this support system all the way around this vascular tissue, so that vascular tissue stays intact even if this plant was to get injured. If something was to bite and take a chunk out of this plant, it's going to bite into dermal tissue, it's going to bite through ground tissue, but very seldom is it going to get to the vascular tissue, which means the plant can still survive without being injured, without that central hub being injured. So the question we think about with this, how could a tree still live after a forest fire or maybe a lightning strike? A lot of trees you'll see, like there was a big forest fire here not too long ago down in Bastrop, Bastrop State Park. Pretty much everything burnt. But there's still some trees standing up out there that they didn't mess with because they're still alive. Because that fire, all it did was it burnt through the dermal tissue, it burnt in a little bit of the ground tissue, but the vascular tissue in the center of the plant survived. That plant is going to come back. That dermal tissue will be replaced, the ground tissue will be replaced by the plant, and the vascular system is still intact. It can still survive even after that fire has burnt all of the outside of that tree, all right, of that plant. Lightning strikes the same way. Lightning hits a tree, it goes down the side of the tree. It doesn't ever get to the xylem and phloem and the vascular tissue in the center. If that portion is not affected, the plant can still do what it needs to do, and it can repair itself and come back and be fully healthy in a matter of time. Okay. So we went from cells to tissues. Now we go tissues to organs. We had 3 cells, 3 tissues. We got 3 organs of a plant. What makes a plant a plant? These 3 things. It has roots, it has stems, it has leaves. All right. If it doesn't have those 3, it's not a plant. All right. Why do green algae not fit in this category? We have to put them in protists because they don't have these 3 organs. They don't have roots. They don't have stems, so to speak, and they don't have leaves. All right. So they don't fit in this because they don't have the 3 basic organs of a plant. All right. All right, so we look in this first picture here, and we see all 3 portions. We see the roots underneath the ground. We see the stem popping up, pushing upward, making that plant grow tall. And then we got our leaves up there. All right, we got those cotyledons on here, the embryonic seed leaves. All right. The roots are for anchor and support. They're what hold that plant in position. If those roots, bigger the plant gets, the bigger the root system is. If it doesn't have that, it's not going to stay upright. Right? It's not going to be able to hold that tall plant in place. It's just going to fall over. Okay. The root system also is used to bring up water, to bring up minerals. Bigger the plant, more roots you need, because the more water for photosynthesis, the more minerals, the more food it needs, things like that. So it has to have that bigger root system, and it gets that from the soil. Here on the bottom right, we have a picture of a root. All right, there are different portions to the root, different parts. So the first thing we look at is you have root hairs. These root hairs are sent out all directions around the root, and they're used for gathering materials. They're going to bring in that water. They're going to bring in those minerals that they need, that plant needs. Okay. Second portion, if we look all the way down at the bottom, we have a root cap. That root cap is a very hard, thick layer that covers the end of the root. What do these roots have to do? In order to do their job, to hold and support everything on that plant, they've got to be able to get deep into the ground. Well, think about trying to push your finger through your shirt. If you push it through your shirt, you're not gonna go too far. But if you had something hard, pointed, sharp on the end of your finger, you could push right through that shirt and break through. Well, that's what that root cap does. It allows the tip of that root to be covered, protected, and it makes it stronger so that it can push and burrow its way into the ground. All right. Just above that is the meristem. Meristem is the area where the root grows. All of this portion above that root cap, that's already grown, developed, established. The root grows down here at the bottom, right above that root cap. That's where it's going to grow and extend, get longer and longer. Okay. This picture here in the bottom middle, you notice this is a picture of a root. All this fuzzy looking hairy stuff, that's what they are. That's root hairs. Those root hairs are out there. They're out there to absorb. The more root hairs, the more absorption, more things that plant can take in at one time. So we thought that was the root. Let's look at the stems. Stems we don't think about the stem as actually having a purpose other than to make the plant tall. That's just one thing. All right, the stem gives support for the leaves, for the flowers, the major components that are necessary for a plant. All right. They also are the protection and home for the vascular system, the xylem and phloem of the plant. In here, we have a lot of that ground tissue, a lot of those cells that store water, store minerals, store starch, oils, different things like that. All right. There is a portion of the stem that actually doesn't come up out of the ground. It stays in the ground, and that helps the roots. It gives it extra support in order for it not to fall over. That also gives more place for storage. Where's all our stuff coming from? Where's our water? Where's our minerals coming from? It's coming from the roots. So the roots send it up to this portion. It gets stored and stockpiled right there so that it can be set up later when needed. All right. Some stem parts do photosynthesis. Most of our photosynthesis in plants happens in the leaves. We know that. Those little solar panel things that we're about to talk about here in a minute. But even if you pulled every leaf off of a plant, the plant can still survive. You know, there are cells in the stem that contain chloroplasts that can still do some photosynthesis and allow that plant to survive even though it doesn't have those leaves anymore. All right. So we have two different types of growth with this stem. Primary growth, the first thing this plant wants to do is it wants to get tall. All right, the taller the plant gets, the more spread out the leaves can get, the more sunlight it can take in. So that's the primary goal, get tall. All right. Secondary growth is when the plant gets wider, it gets bigger. You think about a tree. A young tree, its first thing is to get real tall. And notice, if you see smaller or younger trees, they're real skinny, but they're tall. They don't start to get wider and bigger around until they get older. That's the secondary growth. All right. First thing is we got to get tall. We got to get these leaves out to the sun. Then we can start building on ourselves and making ourselves bigger. So we have a cross section here of a tree. We have all of our layers. We can see everything here. We have this outer layer of bark that contains lignin, that hardened cell wall that gives a lot of support and a lot of strength and protection. Inside here we have all the different layers of ground tissue. All right. We use this to determine age, approximate age of a tree. A lot of people know, you might not, but every ring of a tree is generally about a year. So this tree here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The outer layer, the lignin layer, makes 8. That tree is 8 years old. It doesn't look that big around, but it's been growing for 8 years. We have the center section here. That's our vascular tissue, our xylem and phloem right there in the middle. We call that the hardwood. It's the heart of the tree, the center of the tree. It's what contains those vessels, so to speak, that carries those nutrients and water up and down, just like blood inside of us. It goes through our major arteries and veins. Okay. Last organ are the leaves. Okay. Leaves all leaves just about have these same similar structures. Okay. We have the blade. The blade is usually the broad and flat portion of a leaf. And you see that here with this huge green leaf. Okay. This is what takes in sunlight, doing photosynthesis right here on the outside of the leaf. We have down here at the bottom, we call this the petiole. It is the stalk of the leaf that connects the leaf to the stem or the branches. Okay, these leaves, they're the little mini solar panels. All right, they want to get them out as far as they can, spread them out. They don't want them overlapping because that's a waste. So we have that petiole that pushes them out away from the stem or the branch, allowing those leaves to have full sunlight to do maximum amount of photosynthesis they can. So we've looked at the cells, the tissues, and the organs of a plant. If these things don't fit, you don't see that in the organism, it's not a plant, and that's why things like green algae don't get put into the plant kingdom, because they don't have all of these things.